expectations. And so when you have people like Kelsey Mitchell, who's just a dog, like a dog, you have AB, you have Caitlin, and then Lexi's playing phenomenal. You have Monique Billings, who is a complete athlete, rim to rim, just a great rim protector for us. And then Maisha Hines-Allen, like, I'm just glad we're on the same team. And so I just feel like we're really stacking our roster. You have young bucks like Raven, heck of a defender. And then you have me, hey, what's going on? And so I just feel like we're stacking the pieces. We're building our training camp brick by brick, and that's what you got to do. We know where we want to be, big picture, but it's super important that you get your daily investments in, and then you'll get there.
180 days, zero basketball, total silence. To truly grasp the terrifying magnitude of what is about to be unleashed on the Women's National Basketball Association this season, you cannot begin under the arena lights or on the glossy hardwood. You have to go somewhere darker, somewhere quieter. You have to step inside the cold, clinical walls of a medical rehabilitation facility, because that is exactly where Sophie Cunningham spent half a year while the rest of the basketball world kept spinning without her. An MCL tear is not something you walk off. It is not a rolled ankle you tape up before the second half. It is a structural demolition of one of the most critical stabilizers in the human body. According to sports medicine research, MCL tears, depending on severity, require anywhere from 3 to 9 months of rehabilitation, and the psychological recovery often outlasts the physical one. For 6 brutal months, Sophie was completely cut off from the roaring crowds, the locker room energy, and the daily rhythm of elite competition. Instead, she was grinding through plyometric circuits alone, logging exhausting mobility sessions, and pushing through weight training while her teammates were living the life she was fighting to reclaim. Isolation at that level does something sinister to the human mind. The psychological toll of a serious injury is frequently cited by sports psychologists as more damaging than the physical trauma itself. Sophie was technically cleared by her medical team, but as any elite athlete knows, a doctor's signature means very little until that repaired ligament is tested in the fire of live competition. There is a vast, terrifying gap between a clean MRI scan and the moment an elite guard can explosively cut off a hard screen at full speed without her brain firing alarm signals. Sophie admitted publicly, with a level of raw honesty rarely seen in professional sports, that she felt cleared 10 different times before the Indiana Fever medical staff would finally authorize full contact practice. They refused to grant her the ultimate green light until the final days of February, armed with every biometric data point and strength measurement available. But numbers on a screen are not the same as staring down a 200-pound forward charging at full velocity. Until that moment arrives, it is all just medical theory. So, when Sophie Cunningham finally pushed through the doors of the Indiana Fever practice facility for the first time in 6 months, the weight in that room was palpable. She stepped onto the hardwood with a surgically repaired knee and 2 enormous questions hanging over her like a guillotine. First, would her body actually hold up to the relentless physical punishment of professional basketball? And second, what kind of roster was she walking back into? The offseason had been a cyclone of negotiations, roster movement, and media chaos. But before she could even finish lacing her shoes, she heard it. The sound, the rhythm, the unmistakable cadence of perfection. Swish, 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 30 consecutive times. No rim, no backboard, just the crisp, clean snap of the net. Sophie stopped dead in her tracks. There at the arc, entirely locked in her own universe, was Caitlin Clark. But this was not the same Caitlin Clark the league had spent an entire rookie season trying to physically bully and break. This was a leaner, faster, surgically precise evolution of that player. She wasn't loosening up her muscles. She was operating at full game speed, sprinting off phantom screens, violently planting her feet, catching on the dead run, and drilling 30 consecutive three-pointers from deep without a single miss. You cannot manufacture that kind of perfection when your lungs are burning and your legs are screaming with lactic acid. That level of robotic consistency under fatigue means one thing: the offseason was spent in complete and total obsession. For context, Caitlin Clark finished her rookie season in 2024, leading all WNBA players in assists and setting the all-time single-season assists record with 337 dimes, shattering a mark that had stood for decades. She was also the unanimous Rookie of the Year. What Sophie was witnessing in that gym was not a player returning from a summer break. It was a generational talent who had identified her own weaknesses and methodically destroyed every single one of them. When reporters cornered Sophie to ask about what she had seen, she did not deliver a polished PR sanitized soundbite. She looked directly into the cameras and issued a warning that sent shockwaves across the league. "Clark is not just back," she said. "She is in cold-blooded MVP form." The absence of any hesitation in her voice made it unmistakable. This was not hype. This was a field report. The same tone you use when you're telling someone a hurricane has already formed and it is headed directly for shore. But the shooting was not even the most jaw-dropping element of what Sophie observed. At one point, the entire practice facility stopped functioning. Every drill halted. Every player on the court turned to watch Caitlin's passing sequences. Clark has always possessed a court vision that borders on supernatural. The ability to read the geometry of a basketball floor in ways that defy conventional understanding. But something had evolved at a completely different level during the off-season. Sophie described specific moments where Clark was delivering pinpoint, no-look passes into completely empty space, not because she lost track of her teammates, but because she was already seeing passing angles that did not yet physically exist. She was throwing the ball 2 full seconds before the window opened, knowing with mathematical certainty where her teammate's body would be 3 steps into the future. Veteran defenders were left frozen, their brains unable to process the physics of what had just happened, and by the time they recovered, the ball was already at the bottom of the net. That is not basketball instinct. That is a different cognitive operating system entirely. While Sophie was quietly witnessing this evolution, a completely different battle was erupting across the internet. A toxic, entirely fabricated narrative had caught fire in the WNBA off-season media ecosystem. Content-hungry accounts had seized a harmless, out-of-context podcast comment from Sophie and weaponized it into a locker room explosion story. According to the manufactured outrage, Sophie was furious with the front office, disgusted with the team chemistry, enraged about her salary, and actively demanding a trade. It spread everywhere. Comment sections, fan forums, social media threads dissecting her old interviews for body language clues. It was a masterclass in digital manipulation, engineered to generate clicks and fracture a franchise from the inside. Sophie Cunningham did not wait for a PR team. She did not let her agent draft a carefully worded non-denial denial. She walked directly onto Twitter and took a flamethrower to every single word of it. Her response was immediate and surgical. She made clear she was not even remotely upset about her contract. She openly acknowledged that multiple WNBA franchises had placed maximum dollar multi-year offers on the table. General managers were actively recruiting her. She turned every single one of them down. Why? Because the entire fabricated controversy had missed the fundamental truth about her character. She wanted to stay in Indiana so badly, trusted her teammates so completely, that she voluntarily signed a team-friendly 1-year deal to preserve the core roster's continuity. That was not crisis management. That was the genuine fury of a fiercely loyal player watching strangers try to burn down everything she had helped build. And that loyalty is precisely why the rest of the league should be deeply alarmed. Because every transformational talent in sports history has needed a protector. Michael Jordan had Charles Oakley, who was known throughout the league for making opposing players pay a physical price for touching his star. Wayne Gretzky had Marty McSorley, a notoriously physical enforcer who ensured nobody laid a hand on the Great One without consequences. Caitlin Clark has Sophie Cunningham. The WNBA is a physically brutal league, and last season, certain veteran players made it their unofficial mission to test whether the rookie phenom could withstand systematic physical punishment. The evidence was documented on tape. In a June 2025 matchup against the Connecticut Sun, J.C. Sheldon deliberately drove her finger directly into Caitlin Clark's eye. Not a basketball play by any measure. Moments later, Marina Mabrey delivered a hard, unprovoked shove that sent Clark stumbling to the floor. These were not accidents. They were calculated provocations designed to rattle and dismantle a young superstar's confidence. The referees hesitated. The league watched. Sophie Cunningham did not hesitate for a single second. On the very next fast break attempt, she tracked Sheldon down and yanked her violently out of the air, sending her crashing onto the hardwood. Sophie accepted the flagrant foul ejection without flinching, walked straight down the tunnel, and showed zero remorse. The message was transmitted in a language every locker room in the country understood. Cheap shots on Caitlin Clark carry a physical price tag, and Sophie Cunningham is the collector. This was not an isolated incident of emotion overriding judgment. There was the moment she went face-to-face with Alicia Clark, and the entire arena held its breath. Players on both benches took a visible step backward. And who could forget the confrontation with Kaylia Copper, one of the most physically feared competitors in the league, where Sophie stepped directly into the blast radius without a trace of hesitation while others scrambled to create distance. What makes this so much more sophisticated than simple aggression is the discipline underneath it. Sophie Cunningham earned her black belt in Taekwondo at the age of 6. A fact that most media coverage treats as a quirky footnote when it is actually the foundational key to her entire psychological profile. Taekwondo at an elite level is not about raw aggression. It is about controlled force, precise timing, reading an opponent's intentions before they execute them, and maintaining absolute composure under pressure. Sophie has had decades of that conditioning hardwired into her central nervous system. She does not swing wildly. She does not make emotional mistakes that hurt her team. She enforces with proportional, calculated precision, and then she slides right back into her role as one of the most dangerous catch-and-shoot threats in the league. The unwritten rule across the WNBA is now etched in stone. You touch number 22, you answer to Sophie. While the media was manufacturing drama and Sophie was reclaiming her dominance on the practice floor, the most brilliant move of the entire offseason was being engineered entirely behind the scenes. General Manager Amber Cox was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Cox was operating with information the casual observer was ignoring entirely. She knew that 2027 is the year the financial reckoning arrives for this franchise. Both Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston, who, in a landmark moment for the league, signed the largest contract extension in WNBA history, will reach eligibility for maximum super extensions simultaneously. If Cox had buckled to media pressure and splashed money on an overpriced free agent this offseason, she would have mathematically crippled the franchise's ability to retain its two most valuable assets. She would have dismantled a potential dynasty before it fully materialized. Instead, she engineered a master plan built entirely around timeline alignment. She locked Sophie in on a team-friendly deal. She retained Kelsey Mitchell, one of the most explosive and genuinely unguardable offensive weapons in the league, on a one-year arrangement specifically calibrated to keep the financial runway intact. Mitchell had larger offers elsewhere. She stayed anyway, citing the locker room bond and explicitly calling out the family environment as the reason she refused to leave. Elite professional athletes do not sacrifice guaranteed money for toxic workplaces. They do not sign one-year team-friendly deals unless they believe, with total conviction, that a championship is not just possible but imminent. And then Cox made a move that was equal parts ironic and devastating for the rest of the league. The Alicia Clark who once stood toe-to-toe with Sophie in a confrontation that froze an entire arena is now wearing an Indiana Fever uniform. Add the relentlessly physical Monique Billings as a bruising interior presence, and suddenly, Indiana's front court looks less like a basketball roster and more like a heavyweight stable. Tyasha Harris and Raven Johnson are bringing suffocating pressure at the guard positions. The era of teams bullying the Indiana Fever is permanently closed. If any franchise wants a physical confrontation in 2026, this roster has an entire depth chart ready to meet them. The rest of the league had a full off-season to study film. Coaches spent months in dark film rooms, breaking down defensive rotations, mapping the spacing, searching for a schematic answer to Caitlin Clark and the Fever. But while every other front office was trying to solve the 2025 version of this team, Indiana quietly and ruthlessly upgraded into something the league has never actually faced. They are bigger. They are more physical. They are more dangerous in ways that do not show up on a basic stat sheet. Sophie Cunningham is healthy, she is motivated, and she has spent 6 months transforming personal adversity into professional fury. Caitlin Clark is operating on a frequency the sport has not previously encountered. The core group is locked in, completely bought into Stephanie White's offensive system, and sharing a chemistry that money cannot manufacture and trade deadlines cannot replicate. When Sophie Cunningham walked through those gym doors and heard 30 consecutive Nets whisper in perfect unison, the question was never whether the Indiana Fever were ready for this season. The real question, the one that should be stealing sleep from every opposing head coach in the league, is whether anyone else is ready for them. The storm is not building on the horizon. It has already made landfall.